Up next, we've got a trio presenting to you for the next session here. So first, Steve Ott with the Forest Service. Steve received his BS in geology in 1993 from Dickinson College in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. Prior to employment with the Forest Service, he spent 2 years working as a geologist mine inspector for the Bureau of Land Management in Southeast Idaho, 9 years with the state of Montana as a rec specialist, and 10 years by URS Corporation as a project geologist. He has been working for the Forest Service on the Upper Blackfoot site since 2015. Secondly, we have got David Bowers. He's a federal Superfund senior project manager for DEQ, and his involvement with the Upper Blackfoot is 21 years and counting. He began with DEQ in 2001 and is a 1998 graduate of the University of Calgary. And lastly, we've got Beau Downing. He's the former restoration project manager of the Upper Blackfoot Mining Complex for the Montana Natural Resource Damage Program. He is now a senior project manager with Tetra, where he works with an interdisciplinary team on surface water resources across the Intermountain West. Please welcome this team. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, and thank you, Dan, for that introduction. I think this topic will be a little bit lighter than the last one. Just to start off, we heard about mining claims, on patented mining claims earlier today, lead mining, lead cleanup, and we also heard about bankruptcy. So that was kind of the precursor for this discussion. In 2016, one of my project peers came up and talked about this project, and we had just started up. We're kind of in the thick of things, learning, trying to figure it out, and now we're here, the heavy lifting is done to talk about how it went. So where is the Mike Horse Mine, UB Upper Blackfoot Mining Complex? It's just east of Lincoln, about 20 miles off of Highway 200. It's before you get to Rogers Pass, and it's also the headwaters of the Blackfoot River. I'll refer to these three agencies as the project partners, and I'll get into why we joined forces. Montana DEQ, obviously Dave Bowers, Montana Natural Resource Damage Program, Beau and others, and then the Forest Service. We're all acting partners for this mine cleanup. I'm not going to go through all these stakeholders. Let's just say there were a lot, and they were the voice for us. They got the inspiration to have the work done on the ground, and they also were effectual in doing a lot of public outreach for us and, carrying the message for us. The other thing is, I've been in this business a long time. I will say I'm learning new stuff every day, and you'll see a list of firms on here that were part of this project. We were fortunate that we had the money in the bank from a bankruptcy to allow us to bring these firms on and the people with those firms, because they were the true experts that made this project a success. You also see a list of contractors. All these folks had a hand in making it a really easy, good project without any safety incidents. And you'll see as we get to the end, we ended up with an amazing product. Usually you say thanks at the end, but I'm going to say it right now. To everybody on these lists, thank you. A lot of you folks are here, or these folks. A lot of really good people helped out with this project. So a quick story about the mine history. Ore deposits were discovered in 1898 by a horse. Joseph Hart Miller had a horse named Mike, and he supposedly got scared by a bear and kicked over some galena, and that started the interest in this Heddleson mining district. And it kind of went on and off with a lot of different mines, basically from the early 1900s up until the war period of 1940 to 1945, and that's when it really started. And obviously there was a lot of lead zinc that was produced at the Mike Horse mine, and basically 95% of the ore that was mined and also the waste that was created happened during that 4 or 5 year period. And then the mine shut down in 1952 after a bunch of leases, and nothing really happened up there except for exploration until we ended up in a bankruptcy settlement. Just a cool picture of the actual Mike Horse mine mill and the facilities, including the bunkhouse. This is the tailings dam that was probably the biggest concern up at the site. It had over 700,000 cubic yards of tailings in it and sat there for a very long period of time. The other interesting thing about this site is in the 1960s, Anaconda took an interest in the site, and you can see this picture depicts drill roads and drill pads everywhere. They basically defined a moly ore body, and they had on paper a plan that would rival the Berkeley pit at one time. The project was shut down mainly because there were a couple factors, but the predominant was its decrease in metals prices, copper and moly. The big thing that happened, we had a rain on snow event in 1975. The tailings dam breached, and you can see it right here. We lost over 300,000 cubic yards down into the headwaters of the Blackfoot River. What were we left with? Red water, orange water, blue water, lots of tailings, impacts to surface water, impacts to groundwater, just kind of a mess, honestly. And you can see the thickness of some of the floodplain tailings based on that picture. What were the concerns? Obviously, the standard list of metals or metalloids, arsenic and lead being the human health concerns, and then we had eco concerns. So what happened? In 2003, DEQ filed a complaint against ASARCO and ARCO. In 2005, ASARCO filed for bankruptcy, and we made a claim, the three agencies. We ended up with a settlement of approximately $40 million that got turned over to the state, and then we entered into, and this is the important part of this slide, what we call the Watershed Restoration Agreement. And it spelled out the roles and responsibilities of each agency, and I would also say it was a blueprint for success. It also talked about how we were to go about the cleanup. We would start at the tailings dam, and then we would start up in the drainage and work our way down. And I'll kind of get into that a little bit later with mixed land ownership. So mixed ownership, obviously there's a lot of patented claims up there, which was private. DEQ would be the lead on that. And then there's a lot of National Forest System lands up there and on patented claims, and the Forest Service was the lead on that. So the two agencies have different decisions. The state worked on the project through the state secret program, and they ended up with a record of decision in 2016. The Forest Service, we typically have removal authority, and we basically did a engineering evaluation and cost analysis in 2007, and that was followed up by an action memo that talked about the cleanup on the Forest Service lands. And you can also see that DEQ put together a lot of other components to the state secret process, as in the RI and the human health and eco risk assessments, as well as a feasibility study. The interesting thing to point out, is the ECA for the Forest Service identified 500,000 cubic yards of waste up there, and Dave will talk more to that later. So what were the goals? Obviously to remove the tailings impoundment, remove the mine waste and tailings from over 3 miles of the Blackfoot River floodplain, and to do all this while operating in the Hendelson Mining District, which is a natural mineralized area with that copper moly ore body as well as others. And then the pipe dream, and this was kind of the marching orders from the Schweitzer administration, the governor's office, repopulate with West Slope cutthroat trout. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dave.
Thank you, Steve. $40 million settlement. As you can see, it's like we need to do what? In addition to the settlement conditions, which were the ECA that Steve explained, and addressing the Mycourse mine waste, which was upstream, we definitely, obviously, logically wanted to work from upstream to downstream. So even though Mycourse mine was a private holding, it was well above everything else. And so the Forest Service and RDEP, the partners, basically said, this makes a lot of sense. It's outside the settlement, but we're going to do it and move forward with it. With that and the preliminary design investigations and everything, it was like, whoops, we've got closer to 1 million cubic yards of waste and not the 500,000 in the settlement. I alluded to the Mycourse mine removals. They were outside the settlement. We needed to move forward with that. We needed to find a new repository location. In the action memorandum, the original one, I identified an area, but just preliminarily, and it was dependent on further investigation of whether it was adequate or not, and it proved to be inadequate. So we had to find a new repository location, buy the land, and go through the legal cost of a lawsuit because people didn't want that in their area. In 2011, some of you will remember the significant flooding that the state encountered. We had to pump almost $1 million into the protection of the repository, or excuse me, not the repository, the tailings impoundment at the time, to protect it from the waters and the runoff. Fortunately, we were able to recover about $100,000 of that money from FEMA claims. And then we also needed to put in a new safer road for the amount of trucks that were going to be hauling waste down the road to the new repository, which was approximately 7 miles away. And that led to a total cost outside of the settlement of $12.3 million. This wasn't $12.3 that just showed up from somewhere else. It was taken out of the $40 million based on the consensus of the partners. We had to, like Steve said, the watershed restoration agreement, we had to agree on each one of those moves to move forward with the project. The construction phasing took place basically from the actual construction on the ground from 2013 to 2020, 7 construction seasons at the headwaters of the Continental Divide and the Blackfoot River. Our seasons ran anywhere from 2.5 months to about 4.5 months, depending on the season. Components of it, this is the repository site. It's approximately 7 miles from the site, like I said, and it's just south of the Blackfoot River and just east of Highway 279. The dam and impoundment removal challenges. The picture of the dam that you see, that is post-1975. It's constructed to look more like an earthen dam. That's not what it looked like in the days of the breach. You can see the removals that are going on in this area here of the impoundment, and what we affectionately called the gray goo, which we were removing the anoxic tailings that were in that state, and they had to dry out to a certain moisture content before we could haul them to the repository. So we weren't hauling liquid, but we also weren't hauling concrete. Oops, there we go. Some of the challenges from a safety perspective, we had depths of tailings that were up to 70 feet in the tailings impoundment, and we would quite often encounter sloughing and so forth, and so that was one of the challenges with the tailings impoundment removal. We also had the Mycourse Creek challenges because we were trying to restore a creek on top of 2 ore bodies, the Little Mountain and the Mycourse, and that took some really good high-level thinking on the part of all of our consultants that were on this job, and I think we put together an excellent product on that, along with the steep capture system that you see there. Floodplain construction, we had 40 acres of floodplain that needed to be completed. The removals there were around 400,000 cubic yards, and we needed fill material to complete this process, and fortunately the Forest Service was able to identify an on-site borrow source where we were able to remove approximately 350,000 cubic yards of borrow to fill the floodplain. Some of the consultants out there can do the math on how much that would cost if it was off-site. One of the other challenges, so that we could economize on the money being spent, is we had restoration, we had remediation followed right on the tail end of remediation with restoration. And so there was even integration that went on. Restoration contractors don't have the big equipment. Our remediation contractor did. The remediation contractor hauled almost all of the floodplain backfill that was being brought in, and obviously hauled out all of the waste. And then the remediation contractor worked on the construction of the streams. In all, over the 7 construction seasons, we hauled 43,933 trucks down Highway 200, up Highway 279 without an incident. which is something the project is extremely proud of. Among other challenges, if you've ever driven Ranger's Pass, you know that the Mike Horse Mine holds the record for minus 70 degrees as the coldest spot in the lower 48. So, you know, we got along. Steep terrain under all conditions. Managing water in a 42-inch pipe. Again, contractors out there, you know how easy this is. And then uncooperative H2O throughout the areas. And then the challenge of controlling access to looky-loos that want to come in and see what's going on was also one of our biggest challenges. And with that, I'll turn it over to Beau to talk about restoration.
Thanks, David. So as Dave said, remediation and restoration were integrated. Our funds were integrated, our design processes were integrated, and our construction was integrated. That's sort of rare. Normally it would be a linear process. You're going to take something, you're going to clean it up, you're going to remediate it, you're going to reclaim it, which is not the same as restoration. And that's often, if somebody wants to take it beyond reclamation and do restoration, that's usually a linear process. Sometimes there's a temporal gap, sometimes there's a spatial gap, sometimes there's both. But in this instance, anytime remediation changed or made progress, the wheel turned. Sometimes it turned in the right direction and restoration would turn with it. Sometimes it would turn in the wrong direction. Unforeseen instances of, you know, deeper depths of mine tailing contamination. Other challenges with borrow or other issues associated with that. So as remediation is working, restoration is working in hand with it to achieve our project goals, to meet our project results that match the project goals that Steve talked about earlier. So for remediation, it was protect human health and the environment, and that meant getting the metals and all the chemical components out of it that made it unsafe for humans and for the ecosystem. Restoration wanted to take it a step further. We wanted to take the benefits of the chemical processes that remediation was taking care of, no longer having surface water, groundwater, and sediment interacting with metal contaminated soils, and restore the physical and biological components after that chemical part was done. And so as those two groups and the Forest Service, whereas all three of us are working together as project partners, and all of our consultants are doing all this design and iterations and integration, we're moving toward project results. And because of the phasing and the sequencing of the project, it really was a spatial and temporal component. You could see the march of time. You could see the cleanup occur, you could see the restoration get built, and you could follow the project results along as we went. So what came out of the project? What did we get for more than $40 million? We improved subsurface water quality. In most instances, metals have been measured below chronic aquatic life standards. If they're not there yet, they're very, very close. We restored 16,780 feet of stream. That's a lot of stream to restore at the headwaters of the Blackfoot River. And just to put into perspective some of the biological component, that's 210,000 willow cuttings between the two banks at the density and spacing that we had specified. We built 519 pools. We built step pools. We built lateral scour pools. We built a lot of habitat for the fisheries component. We connected fish-bearing streams. We had brook trout. They were early colonizers. There's a big wetland complex at the downstream end. Brook trout don't mind it. There's some other streams that brook trout lived in. And boy, those guys like to move and they like to probe. And because some of the chemical barriers were gone, they were moving up unremediated and unrestored stretches of reaches to go find that clean water just because they like to go check out new places. And then cutthroat trout, once we reconnected Anaconda Creek, we anticipated that they would come. And we would take some steps to figure out if that was true. As Dave said, we were about 40 acres of floodplain wetlands, and something that you get to do with restoration and a fairly deep pot of money is install a whole lot of riparian plants to kickstart that biological component. And somebody who used to work on the project liked to say challenges are just opportunities to excel. There were certain instances where the project got delayed, slowed down. There were some pauses for regrouping for budgetary reasons. There was COVID. This happened while COVID was going on. It finished up there. But part of it is when you have plants that you thought you were going to buy from the nursery in a T40 pot, a little guy, and you get them in a gallon pot, for just a few bucks more, that ended up being a really good thing. And then we also, as part of this project, because of the Myclor's mine and the tailings impoundment, we restored about 14 acres of upland slopes and a whole lot of plants installed up there. And one of the cool things about the upland slopes and working with really smart people, we three get to take credit for a lot of work that other people did. We raked the forest floor before it was cool. We actually had duff harvest locations identified on the forest where we got permission to actually go rake the forest floor for the duff, which has all the microbes and all the fun stuff in it. Put them in bags, haul them up the hillside, and put it in places that were devoid of those things. And as Dave said, all the bar was locally sourced, but so were the willows cuttings, so were the duff, all the things that went into building and restoring that physical and biological process after the chemistry was good, where we went. So this is a really good example of restoring the physical component of the project. So if you see the confluence of the two streams there, that's Anaconda Creek coming in from the right. That's the Cutthroat Bearing stream. That's Bear Trap Creek coming in on the left. And that is the physical geographic starting point of the Blackfoot River. So we actually built the cornerstone of the Blackfoot River as part of this project. There's actually a really cool rock that we picked just for that purpose. So yeah, you can go there. You can take your kids there. My kids have been right to that spot. And you can actually go see the actual geographic starting point of the Blackfoot River. And we didn't talk a lot about it because that's a whole other rabbit hole, but there is a water treatment plant that will be treating water forever in the upper Blackfoot. So maybe that's next year's topic. So this is that same confluence point of Anaconda, which is now coming in on the left, and Bear Trap coming in on the right. There's our cornerstone rock. And you can see the biological components starting to come in. We've got the physical processes. We're moving water. We're moving sediment. And all the plants that we put in are starting to grow. So we're getting those types of results for the biology. This is the old tailings impoundment site. So the dam would be just down on the left-hand edge of the picture. That's looking up Bear Trap Creek. That's Myclor's Creek coming in from the right. You can see, and when I talked about kind of that spatial and temporal component, you can tell the age of the remediation and restoration based on canopy height. If you look to the headwaters, like Dave said, we started at the upstream and moved downstream. So those plants are bigger. And if you go there now, it's been a while, but there are 10 and 15 foot tall riparian plants where these guys are about 7 or 8 right now. So this is the very upper end of Bear Trap Creek. This was in 2020. So now you can't get into the channel. But this is 4 years post remediation and restoration. So you can see that the canopy is starting to close in on the stream. We've got really good willow coverage on banks. This is in upper Myclor's Creek. This is above a liner. So this is above that geosynthetic liner that Dave talked about that separated the ore bodies and some mine impacted water that was there. So this is achieving almost 100% canopy cover, fully shaded. If you go there now, you'd have to crawl through that and get underneath of it. And you would hardly know there's a stream there if it wasn't for those plants. And so as you do this, so you've restored the physical function, you've started putting in the biological components, the vegetation, the thing, the coarse woody material, the fine woody material, the leaf litter that comes from the riparian plants, and you start to colonize this stuff. And so the bugs are first. You know, the brook trout come up, they're like, oh, there's nothing to eat here. We turn around and go back. But this was 1 to 2 years post remediation or restoration. We started to get, you know, early colonizers of macroinvertebrates, which is super cool to see. NRDP actually funded a project that ended in 2022, and the final report came out in 2023. And we're approaching reference conditions for this area on taxonomic richness, you know, species, you know, biomass, and those types of things. So the bugs came, which was really cool to see. But what followed that was, you know, these guys, these lunkers, these brook trout that were ready to go probe new sections. Food's there, bugs are growing, they're hatching, they're eating, they're enjoying those 519 pools that got built, and they're hanging out. And I can't remember. Yeah, this guy weighed about it's in grams down there, but he was a couple pound brook trout that's 11 inches. He's shaped like a football. And when FWP started doing the shocking, you know, it was like, oh, we're finding all these brook trout, multiple age classes. So they're already spawning up there. They're having a good time. We're not seeing cutthroat trout. It's kind of disheartening because Anaconda Creek's been connected for a little bit. And then we found one. Still had paw marks, a couple years old. They probably moved out of Anaconda Creek and up into the channel. And I've talked to the fisheries biologist recently, and the fish per 100 meters in all of their sections are great. The brook trout and cutthroat trout have opposite spawning cycles, so they're not really over or out competing or hybridizing. They're hanging out. The cutthroat trout are there. The brook trout are there. The bugs are there. The vegetation's there. All the floodplain wetlands, which we made jurisdictional on purpose, regardless of Sackett. They're surface water connected. We actually built high flow channels that help feed those and outflow them back down to the stream. So it just ended up being a really great project, and that big goal, that stretch goal of getting cutthroat trout back into the headwaters of the Blackfoot River beyond Anaconda Creek worked out. And with that, any questions? Be happy to answer them.
Questions?
Hi, I think this might be a question for Dave, but I had a question about the repository for the tailings, and basically how was it designed, and did you have to manage for drain down coming off the tails after you moved it to that new location?
Absolutely. We were very fortunate in the property that we found because it is a glaciated area, and we have clay that is from that area that it has a transmissivity that's more conservative than basically or competes with an HDPE liner. As far as bottom wise, drain construction is there, an under drain that reports to a basin. We're getting very little out of there right now. Interesting enough, we also monitor that point, and we're getting the water that's coming out of there, out of the drain pipe is very close to meeting DEQ standards already. So we're in a good, and it's going to get a top liner as soon as we're done with the project, but that's not yet.
And I had another question, and it was for the most recent speaker. I'm sorry, I forget your name. I had a question about the water treatment, and you said it'd be treating water forever, and I didn't know about a time frame, like an actual number for forever, because in Nevada there's an actual date, like it's defined, perpetuity is defined. So.
That's a different question.
Oh, okay.
Perpetuity is defined in Montana as 100 years. We're also, I mean, one of the things about that is, you know, with technology, and especially with the shift in political focus on hard rock mining in the West and the fact that we've got a lot of water issues, maybe we're going to see better technologies moving forward. They're going to be cheaper, and we'll get to something that's going to be a little more palatable from an economic perspective.
And sorry, I'm tacking on another question about how is it funded to run that 100 years of the water treatment. Is that part of the 40 million, or is there different, like a long-term trust or something?
Good question. It's a long-term trust, and it's another ASARCO bankruptcy settlement that was for Greater Montana that also includes the Black Pine Mine, East Helena, and so forth. And there's dedicated money to the operation of that. It's due to run out in 2029. But we can reapply for more from the trust.
Time for one more question. Any other question?
What's the cost?
To date, for what we've done, the $40 million, but the in-kind that the Forest Service provided on the borrow material, 350,000 cubic yards, the things that we're doing to address what's left in the rod. There's more work to be done. We're looking at grants and everything else to fund that, but we've got about $1 million left out of the original settlement. So we were able to do all of that to date on the original settlement.
One more back here.
Yeah, I have a question. Because of this pollution was generated by the U.S. government during the war, has the U.S. government pitched in at all?
From a bankruptcy settlement perspective, no.
From the U.S. Defense Fund, this mine was used to produce lead for bullets. Does the U.S. government participate in the reclamation?
Lead and zinc, no. Other than the Forest Service helping, no. And I'm not aware of anywhere in the U.S. that's happened. There were plenty of other war effort mines as well, and it was lead and zinc. They were also using the zinc during that period as well.
Great. Thank you.